Inaba of the Moon and Inaba of the Earth is the third part in the Touhou Bougetsushou trilogy of works which all focused on moon shit. Silent Sinner and Blue on an invasion of the moon, Cage and Lunatic Runegate on moon culture and history, and now we conclude with Inaba of the Moon and Inaba of the Earth, which focuses on, well, an Inaba of the Moon. It's right there in the title. I know I say conclude, but much like how Lunatic Runegate was serialized concurrently with Silent Sinner, Inaba was also being serialized concurrently. Here's an updated timeline. All of Bougetsushou started their respective serializations in June 2007, busy fucking month right there, with Inaba being the last to conclude in December 2009. Inaba is a 4-koma comedy manga placing a spotlight on the characters of A and Tae with emphasis on Racing and Tae. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. If you would like to support me and the channel, you can do so on Patreon, link on screen and in the description. Not only will you be thanked in the videos, but will also receive exclusive content such as a video taking a look at the Bougetsushou books themselves, as well as some bonus items related to the works. Not only was Inaba serialized concurrently with the rest of the Bougetsushou books, the events that take place are as well. There's several references to the other two works throughout Inaba. For example, there's a moment of Kaguya having a flashback to Chapter 2 of Lunatic Runegate, where 18 is given her advice about finding her place now that she lives on Earth. Later on, Chapter 9 of Inaba takes place at the rocket naming party at the Scarlet Devil Mansion, including very similar panels as well. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the rocket naming party takes place in Chapter 9 of Silent Sinner as well as Chapter 9 of Inaba. But even though Inaba's serialization and events within are concurrent, as well as being included in the Bougetsushou series of print works, the canon of Inaba is dubious. It should immediately be noted that Zune is credited differently here. In Silent Sinner, Zune is credited as Gensoku, or original work, meaning he was the one that wrote it. But for Inaba, Zune is credited as Genan, or original plan or draft. It's hard to tell how involved Zune was in the making of Inaba. It's entirely possible all the involvement Zune had was him being all like, "Yo, I'm a busy boy, do some shit on the rabbits." And Toshihira Arata said, "I got you, fam." And we ended up with Inaba. It's impossible to know. Zune was busy writing 2 other print works as well as making games during the time. Dude had a ton on his plate, so it was time to delegate. So working with the assumption that the reins were handed over to Toshihira Arata to make Inaba, I feel that we should operate on 2 additional assumptions when looking at this work in a larger context of Touhou canon. The first is the PC-98 assumption. This is basically things are canon until otherwise contradicted, much like the PC-98 games. In fact, there are some major contradictions regarding the characters that affected my enjoyment of Inaba, but I'll address that in a bit. The second assumption is the sake of comedy assumption. This shit is a comedy gag manga. A bunch of it is going to be exaggerations and over the top if it's for the haha funny. Would it surprise you to know that Inaba focuses on the Inabas? Fucking mind-blowing, I know. Of the 2 Inabas, Racing is our protagonist. She's the straight man of the main cast. When some dumb shit happens, she's there to provide that wise guy response. Issue is, I don't like the execution of what a straight man is in Inaba. What that ultimately means is that Racing ends up being a punching bag. She's repeatedly bullied and abused to the point that it can come off as very mean-spirited at times. There's a bit where Racing is feeling homesick looking at an egg as the Ante household was doing moon viewing shit. So here comes Tae to break her yoke, sending Racing to tears. What compelled Tae to do that? I don't fucking know, but the trauma only begins there. This entire work is lousy with Racing's casual abuse. I wasn't really a fan of any of this, it just felt fucked up. And a lot of that abuse, surprisingly enough, stems from Aiding. I hate her portrayal in Inaba, straight up. She's presented here as being a sadistic abuser to Racing, which is completely inaccurate and contradictory to what is said in Lunatic Runegate. To quote Chapter 2 of Cage and Lunatic Runegate, 18, noticing the subtle change in Racing's demeanor, said this to put her at ease. 18 cares about Racing. She notices her subtleties, she notices her emotions, and what she's feeling, and she instead shows love rather than just fucking whipping her. Every time 18 was on screen, I was upset, because it wasn't 18. It was some bitch perpetuating a toxic relationship masquerading as the actual 18. Kaguya, on the other hand, is relatively accurate to her actual character. Is she a bit exaggerated in playing it up for the camera? Yeah, sure. But at least I recognize her as Kaguya. She's the carefree wildcard here. She'll just do shit on a whim because she feels like it and can be the catalyst of a chapter story. Piss joke. The other Inaba, Tae, is the bokeh to Racing's Tsukomi. There's nothing wrong with this approach to comedy. It's a tried and tested formula and has even been proven to work within Touhou with M1. That shit can be really funny. And Tae is here to be just that, to pull pranks on and fuck with Racing. A bokeh and nothing more. Tae lacks depth. Okay, I get that I'm coming off as a dickhead by saying give me depth and a comedy for Koma, but fuck off. You can have both. Shimeji Simulation does both, so it's not impossible. Tei and Ayante have a mutualistic dynamic. Both parties provide the other with something they want, and everyone benefits. Taking it back to chapter 1 of Lunatic Renegade when talking about Tei, but would help ensure that no humans would ever approach if we would bestow our knowledge on the rabbits. And, without Tei, we wouldn't be able to use them being Earth rabbits, at all, which would be a problem. None of this dynamic is really present in Inaba. Rather, the relationship that Tei has, especially with Raisin, feels too antagonistic. Tei fucks with Raisin fucking deals with it. End of story. Inaba does have the occasional chapter that brings in another character outside of the core Ante cast to hang with. There's a chapter where Raisin and Tei hang out with Renosuke at Korindo. I enjoyed the Alice chapter. For some reason, the series of panels of Reimu relaying her daily schedule has lodged itself into my memory. Shit. They nerfed her ribbons! The ending 6th of Inaba has some heavy involvement from the Watatskis as they just show up at Ante and hang out for a while. And of course, there she is! It hurt. Yeah. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I like the Moko. Girls are cutest when they're sad. The art is cute too. It's definitely steeped with that moe boom flavor of the late 2000s, early 10s. If you need an example, think something like Lucky Star. For some reason I get reminded of that show, especially when looking at the way Aiden's eyes are drawn in this panel. It's very obvious that when you look at the artists, Toshihiro Arata's Pixiv, that era for sure impacted his style. You can see fan art of stuff like K-On!, Idolmaster, and Samazuma Gadayo. Those are probably some examples of influences, on the way the characters are drawn at least. The character art is fine. I've got zero problems there, but the panels come off as anemic. Many are sparse on detail, really only showing a background when it's needed to establish a scene's location or to set up a gag. But the further you get into a page, the less there tends to be to the point of the background being wholesale dropped. There's also a ton of duplicate panels. Can there be comedy repetition? Absolutely. But I feel that Inaba relies on repetition a lot. There are several panels where it's very clearly just the previous panel but with one changed detail or different text boxes. And while both anemic and repetitive panels are problems, it sure does make doing the coloring for this video a lot easier. Inaba is short as fuck. It's only 30 chapters at about 230 to 240 total pages. This shit could be very easily blitzed through in one sitting if you really wanted to. But despite how low of a time commitment it would be to just read it, I wouldn't recommend this. It comes off as a sanctioned fan work, rather than an official Touhou story, which this supposedly is. That's why I've been a bit more harsh on this, because I'm holding it up to the standards set by its contemporary Silent Sinner. I really do not like a lot of the portrayals of the characters here. There's nothing here if you love the world building and history present in Lunatic Renegade either. It's a shame, but if you decide to skip Inaba of the Moon and Inaba of the Earth, I don't think you're missing much, honestly.